Hey everybody, I'm your host, Robbie Straczynski. Thank you so much for joining us on episode number 101 of Cards Chat, the friendliest poker podcast in town. Today's guest is one of the premier coaches in the poker world, but to be a great coach, you obviously should be a great player as well, and he certainly is that too. Once known primarily as an online heads-up specialist, he expanded his skills into high-stakes multi-table tournament play. That's MTTs, and that's boosted his combined live and online career winnings to over $5 million. We're going to chat with him today about his successes on and off the felt, and about his new training course on Run It Once. Kevin Rabichow, welcome to the Cards Chat Podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Cool. Got that those dulcet tones. Those like you talk to a lot of people, you coach a lot of people, and you got the course going. So, if you always had sort of like this, I guess, a voice for radio, something like
that. That's a fair question. I'm not sure. I've had to get used to hearing my own voice because I've been making training content for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that has anything to do with the way that I talk, but certainly having a new microphone for the course doesn't hurt either.
There you go. Yes, always good to have a good mic. You're lucky you have seeming like a good like soundproof room, and like the limits the echo. That I don't have as much here, but we certainly try, guys. You would if I always joke with people like if you're just listening, you can't tell. But if you were watching and you saw the full setup of this room that I'm in, you'd be like, oh, look at that shoestring Robbie. All right. So as I told you before we hit the record button, I don't know as much about you as I do about, the other 100 or like some of them, like most of the other 100 people I've interviewed here on the CardsChat podcast. So, I just genuinely want to, get to know you a little bit better. Tell us, where were you born? Where did you grow up? And just sort of, we ask, the poker story. Are you a product of the moneymaker boom or home games around the kitchen table, something like that?
Right. Yeah, of course. So I grew up in Chicago. I went to school like downtown, pretty competitive high school, and late, I guess, high school would have been around the time that I found poker. I was class of 2007, so not quite the moneymaker boom, I guess, but shortly thereafter. Right. I think the first World Series of poker that I watched on TV was the year that Greg Raymer won. So
okay.
I was close. So definitely, like, me and my high school friends played a lot. At some point, I think I moved into a new house when I was 15, and like we had space to host my friends, and somehow we inherited a poker table from my grandfather. So like that was the thing that we did when we hung out at my place, was we played poker, even if it was just for pennies. So I certainly was taking it pretty serious by the end of high school. I went to the University of Chicago, and right. And once I started college there, that was kind of the time that overlapped with me taking poker, I guess you might say, like, professionally, right? Like I wasn't really playing full time at that point, but whenever I wasn't studying, I was playing poker, and made decent money at it leading up until Black Friday or so, which happened to be the year that I graduated.
Okay. So you got like an economics degree. So, you had... I
did.
Right. So my question is, not everyone who goes and, a University of Chicago economics degree can open lots and lots of doors. Did you have sort of like a path that you thought you were going to take before you said, hey, maybe let's do this poker thing for a living?
Yeah, there were a few. I don't know that any of them were like extremely well formed in my mind. A few opportunities came up, the first of which I think I had an idea that I wanted to be an actuary, or that I wanted to work in I wanted to work with numbers. I guess that was my first inclination as I started to explore things in college. And that was what I was strongest at, like mathematics and stats and that kind of stuff came pretty natural. That's why I was studying economics. But I started to get into what actually it took to become an actuary. Like I signed up for the first exam, and I got the study materials, and I was like, I hate this. And I just, I didn't even take the first exam, or maybe I took a practice test or never took the first exam. And then I think after that, I got the idea I wanted to be a day trader. And I spent about 6 months in Las Vegas. I actually took time off from university to go to Las Vegas and work for a day trading company. Which, like, in hindsight, I think I only wanted to go there because it was Vegas and I was playing poker, and like that was an opportunity to take time off from school to focus on something other than school,
Sure. It's got that
So
appeal, the
yeah,
bright lights, the glitz, you know.
yeah, I wasn't even 21, so I couldn't even really
Oh gosh.
gamble. Like it was, but you know, point being, I think I was half-heartedly exploring those career options. I think
Interesting.
poker was the one that had my interest.
Mhm.
So yeah, my friends and my partner like to make fun of me for never having held down a real job. Although
Uh-huh.
that's no longer true. I worked in a catering company in 2019.
Uh-huh.
So I've now had my first real job.
Well, there you go. Well, we'll talk
Uh,
about Kevin Rabichow,
yeah.
the foodie, as well, later on in the
Yeah.
show. Um, okay, so usually, typically, most professional players worth their salt. They track their results. They take notes, all that sort of thing, and you got to
Yeah.
treat your poker like a business. When did you sort of make that switch and realize, okay, if I want to be professional, I've got to treat it professionally. And also when did you get family support for that sort of a thing when they saw that you're doing things the right way and making a living from it?
Yeah, I almost think that I got into that like surprisingly early.
Hmm.
I was I this reminded me of the fact that I was like somewhat embarrassingly tracking my results in that like high school home game that I was
Awesome.
talking about. So I was even keeping track of like wins and losses against my friends for like $5 at a time, and taking pride in the fact that I was coming out ahead so often, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think like treating it professionally was somewhat second nature to me, and and I guess for some of the same reasons, my parents put a lot of trust, I think, into my decisions or my process, and um, I mean, from the time that I was first playing poker to the time that I actually said like, yeah, I'm not going to get a job, like there were quite a few years for them to get used to the idea that I was playing a game and I was pretty good at it.
Right.
Because I did finish university, right? I didn't
Oh,
drop out.
exactly. Right.
So that might have helped kind of ease them into the idea that I could do this for a living. But yeah, there wasn't really much of maybe they had some hesitation, but there wasn't much of a back and forth there. It was kind of just like, I graduated, I can't play in the US on the internet anymore. I think I'm just going to go to Canada. And they were like, okay, like we'll see how it goes. And just kind of, I gave them more reasons after that, I guess, through
Sure.
success to continue to agree to the decision I had made.
For sure. So how is it that online poker is specifically what appealed to you? Because, yes, a lot of folks, professionals, they did move to Canada, to Mexico, once Black Friday hit, places where they could
Yeah.
play. And others just, said, okay, that's it. I'm going to switch to live poker. You didn't do that just yet. So, why
Right.
did you feel like, okay, online poker is my thing and I'm going to double down on it?
I mean, I I played, I guess, a little bit of live poker, but like that's where I learned the game. I played
Hmm.
online um technically for like 5 years before having to make that judgment call about, how I was going to pursue professional poker.
Right.
And all of it was online basically. So I was big into the 2+2 forums. I used a lot of training resources. I was very much immersed in the online community of poker.
Hmm.
When I went to casinos, I don't know, this has changed now, but like at the time it wasn't my job. Like I didn't think about going to the casino as my eventual career.
Hmm.
I would go as like a trip. I would go. I guess I lived near what was it? Soaring Eagle Casino in Michigan was the first casino I ever went to when I was 18, because you
Uh,
can play
right.
on the reservation when you were 18. And yeah, I mean, me and my high school buddies, we slept in a van. Like I think I lost $200, and that was probably way too much money to lose at that time. So I wasn't treating that professionally. But then I would go and I would play like 5 cent, 10 cent on full tilt poker, and I would meticulously track my bankroll, and I would
Right.
I'd have poker tracker going. So
Sure.
online was kind of always the professional game in my mind.
Sure. So why, originally you started as a heads up specialist. So that's obviously
Mhm.
a very, narrow niche of poker to specialize in. That's
Yeah,
not the same as those high school games. It's not the same, as
sure.
most people starting out with MTTs. So why did that attract you? And why do you think that that's where you specifically found success in the beginning?
Yeah, I guess it's not clear to me why I was able to find success there. I
Mm,
mean, other than just, maybe some innate skill sets, or maybe some just the environment of the game at the time was quite profitable, but every game was quite profitable. So I don't know that that's it either. I found the game primarily because a good friend of mine, this guy Dan, who doesn't play professionally, he was playing it at a time when we, like me and my small circle of friends in high school and in college, were kind of getting excited about poker. And he was playing the biggest stakes of any of us. Like he was kind of, I don't want to say like the leader of the group, but maybe the person kind of driving the direction of what we were paying attention to in poker. And he started playing it. I don't know why. I should get back in touch with him and find out why he why he found heads up poker over other formats. But yeah, it was just like, it looked like a lot of fun. We talked some strategy, and then again, there was like its own section in the 2+2 forum. So once I got interested in the game, it was easy to find a community around that game. And the first year that I went to the World Series of Poker, which was 2011, I stayed in a house organized by like the Heads Up No Limit forum on 2+2. And there were like 13 of us or something in this house in Vegas. Like I'm 21. It's my first time playing at the World Series, and I'm surrounded by Heads Up players. So I guess after that experience, it's no surprise that it sort of stuck. That was probably only 1 or 2 years into me playing Heads Up.
Sure. So where did you find the most joy there? Was it the community? What, you had your Heads Up people? Was it the money you're winning, or was it just, I love numbers and like a video game, you just want to, be the end boss?
I do think it's the community for me. Like I am someone, I've spoken about this, I guess, in like almost not like coaching material, but almost like suggesting kind of approaches to professional poker. Like I was not often someone who chased EV for the sake of EV. Like I wasn't someone who put in like the long hours and tried to move up to the highest stakes and was always like aiming for the biggest dollar amount. I was very much like, I don't want to say risk averse, but I guess like balanced in the fact that I also wanted to enjoy what I was doing, and also wanted to think about avoiding burnout and things of that nature. That was like, I don't know, strangely important to me even early on. So I think like for sure, at least with the 2+2 forums, I wasn't on there posting every day because I love to give away free info or that I thought it was helping my game necessarily. I think I just enjoyed community around a game that I was like interested in, right? It was a cool like intellectual exercise. I think that's also what drew me to coaching, like all the same reason, right? You get to meet people, you get to help people, but there's something more than just like playing for the dollars. There's an interaction around the game and what you're doing.
I think what you're saying definitely resonates, with 300,000 members of the CardsChat forums as well. Definitely there's a lot of, we're not all necessarily crushers and, kicking all kicking all of our opponents' butts at the tables, but there's definitely that sense of community that's pervasive on the forums and, of course, among our listeners here on the podcast as well. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit further about that joy. Of the things that you remember from those early years before you had your big 6-figure scores and stuff, what do you consider to have been sort of your proudest moments or your biggest accomplishments?
It's a good question. I mean, like if I'm thinking about the times when I was enjoying the game the most, the memories that kind of stand out, they're often around like the intersection of a success in poker and like other people kind of working towards the same thing, right? Like other people who I was with. I mean, I had the opportunity to travel a lot for poker, even online poker. So a number of I guess what you call them like working vacations stand out in my mind, where I'm like, not only did I have a 50K month or whatever playing online Heads Up, but I was also in New Zealand with like one of my best friends, and so, like having that cool intersect of a very memorable vacation and also success happening like in overlap is a lot more. It just stands out to me more than something like the biggest score I've ever had or the biggest tournament win. Those things are valuable too. But so I think about like essentially 2 years of playing Heads Up online with like the same 3 or 4 guys who I rotated through roommates in Toronto when we first moved up there. And like none of us had incredible success during those years, but there's just lots of like little moments of, you play a 12-hour session against some crazy opponent and you finally stack them. And it's as a heads up player, that's a unique feeling. I think you very often are focused solely on the goal, singularly on the goal of winning all the money that's on the table,
Right.
which is different from, like, I guess it's kind of like winning a tournament, but it's just so much more achievable in a heads up game. So it's
Sure.
like you get that quite often. So like little hits of that. I can just remember a bunch of different iterations of that. But like I said, with my old roommates or in different countries or whatever, like that's kind of what stands out.
It's pretty cool, like those of us who have been in poker for a while, even, you just fans who are into it and watching, a lot of it just looks really cool. You see those who've been super successful, millionaires, that sort of thing, but also those who make a living playing professionally. You always say it's a tough way to make an easy living, but you are, quite frankly, among one of the more successful pros there are. And you have been, since your 20s, and you're talking about, getting to go to New Zealand. It's a tremendous blessing to have that sort of freedom, that sort of lifestyle, be able to do what you want, where you want, while you're engaged in a game that you love so much. When you encounter other people, in the supermarket or in the coffee shop, whatever it is, they ask you, oh, strangers, oh, what do you do? What do you sort of tell them? Because it's, kind of interesting to anyone around the world. Oh, this 20-year-old guy, like living a life of leisure,
Yeah. That always changed. Like, what I'm sure the way that I approached that when I was younger is different from what I do now.
Okay.
I remember having that conversation with a lot of my peers like earlier on, because I think that was a frequent point of discussion, is like, how do you avoid the topic of being a poker player? And part of me is like, why are we trying to avoid the topic of being a poker player? But I get it. Like, sometimes you get into it and all of a sudden it's a 1 hour long conversation about, some really mundane there's a knowledge gap between the lay person and the professional. So it can be exhausting to bridge that knowledge gap. I guess I just got used to it. I don't know. Or I just found like the right answers to those questions after saying, like, I'm a poker player a bunch of times.
Right.
And
how
more
about now?
recently, I kind of lean into the coaching part a little more, partly because that's just true. Like, partly because I coach just as many, if not more, hours than I play in recent years. But also partly because it's, I think, a more relatable conversation for a lot of people. And it's just what I want to talk to them about, right? Like, I like talking about, teaching or coaching or whatever variation on educational content, or there's people who can relate to that. They have a streamer that they know, they have they follow YouTube channels. There's just more ways to have an interesting conversation there. But sure, sometimes they just want to talk about what gambling's like and what going to the World Series is like, and I'm happy to do that as well.
Understood. Well, we got plenty of coaching questions for you there up next, but I did have one specific question. Because you moved to Canada, you were in Toronto for a number of years now. You said you're in Ottawa, the Canadian capital. We know now Ontario is this ring-fenced jurisdiction. Just curious to I don't know that many people who live there who've had to deal with this specific situation. Just to hear your thoughts about it. Is it good, bad, why, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it had a very specific impact on me this past weekend because I wanted to play in the W Coop main event and the Party Poker Millions, and those networks are not available to me at home, but they are available to me if I'm able to relocate to Quebec, for example, which is quite a short drive from Ottawa. So yeah, I guess first, just to answer the question of like the overall impact, what I saw was in, I guess, in the spring, right around the time that like the spring series was running on Stars and on GG, there was word of certain sites migrating to this closed off Ontario only network. Some sites completely ignored it. Some sites just didn't even, breathe a word about it. So sure, I guess it's business as usual for them. But a lot of the major players, PokerStars, Party Poker, 888, GG, they all announced some kind of intent to make their own Ontario only platform.
Yep.
So for me, it means I just don't really play that much. That was already kind of the case to some extent because of my coaching business, because I've been traveling again. Like
Right.
now that there's fewer travel restrictions, I went to the World Series and stayed the full 7 weeks. Like when Florida runs a WPT, I'm usually there.
Right.
There's more live tournament opportunities for me, but I still really like to play the series. I still really like to play the occasional Sunday. It looks to me, I believe it's tomorrow that GG, well, you know, September 30th, depending on what day you're listening to this, that GG is switching to WSOP.ca. So GG until now, I could still play on GG, and I played the occasional, tournament weekend or series on there in the meantime from home. But now I'm just, it feels like I'm back in 2011. I'm thinking about, okay, can I set up a secondary office in Quebec and travel there when I want to play? Or, can I get a house shared with some other people and set that up as my address and then travel there when I want to play, kind of thing. That's sort of what it's looking like, but really it just discourages me from playing. It means I probably won't be in those big online events all that often.
Yeah, obviously the major difference is just, liquidity, number of players who are, there, and thus the size of the fields. With that said, the flip side of it is, as far as I've heard from a couple people, quite a few overlays in the tournaments. So, it's like the player experience for you within the Ontario regulated market?
Yeah, that's a good point because I've chosen not to really play on the Ontario sites. I was ignoring the fact, like I've heard from students and from friends that that the games are still run. They're not what you're used to. They're not the big blowout, $1 million Sunday kind of tournaments, but there's still games running, and there's still very likely a good ecosystem there.
Yeah.
And like you said, overlays, because the sites are trying to be like first movers in accumulating, regulated customers in Ontario. So I know that like Party Poker and 888 in particular, the very first day that Ontario was open, they were there. They were the first 2 sites to move to the Ontario only site. And I think as a result, in like April or whatever that was, there was just huge overlay every single day on those 2 sites because they were almost competing for, Ontario players, or in the early stages. I don't know what that looks like now. I guess I am curious to see what the WSOP site will be, because that's the first time there's a WSOP brand in Canada, online. So I'm in terms of volume, I'm a little more optimistic about that site compared to the others. That said, depending on what you're playing, you might be perfectly happy with the Ontario only sites.
It's just always interesting to get that insight on a kind of a relatively unique perspective within the poker ecosystem right now. All right, let's switch gears, as one does at the poker tables as well. You've been a coach for over 10 years now. How did that first begin, that transition from just playing into, oh, I'm liking this coaching thing too?
Yeah, I was trying to remember recently, like what I guess my first coaching gigs were, like, my first students, or like what I was doing there. I think it was kind of informal when I got started. And I think it was just because I was someone who like contributed to forums frequently and wrote my thoughts publicly frequently that I started getting people to privately request coaching, right? Now that my platform is bigger, that happens more frequently, but early on there would be the odd person who just says like, hey, you seem like you know what you're talking about, and I'm trying to get better. Can you help me? So like, I liked that. I mentioned my, I guess, competitive schooling, because I've come to the conclusion that had some influence over like the way that I approach my job now, which is that like doing rigorous preparation is not unusual to me, right? Or having organized processes for solving a problem, like that's something that I got used to when I was younger. So I think that made me better prepared to be a coach now. And it's just like there's not as much friction there for me to get started with those things. A new program comes out and I'm like, sweet, let's learn how to use this, and within 2 days I know how to use it. So that's the type of learner I am, and I like to share that process with people who it doesn't come so naturally for. And I mean, the like creating content really is the only reason that I'm getting those requests more, now than I did 10 years ago. So, going from 2+2 forums, I later joined the training site Heads Up Sit and Go, HUSNG.com. And I made a couple of Heads Up training packs for them. That was like 2012, 2013. And then in 2014, I switched to Run It Once. I started making regular content with Run It Once, and they've kind of, I've been with them for 8 years now. So
Right.
All of my content goes there.
Right. And, of course, if you're not on Run It Once, you could also go to kevinrabichow.com. You've got quite a lot of good material there. And we tried to do our research. But what did I want to ask you? I had a follow up there. Oh, right. Okay. So often I talk to people, professionals as well as amateurs, and it's undeniable that, how swiftly, just and to what extent poker itself has changed. The game has gotten so much tougher. Talking about Texas Hold'em specifically. By the same token, you've been coaching for 10 years. That's standing the test of time. You're still doing it, you're still loving it, and you're still being approached. You got tons of students. How has your, if at all, how has your methodology changed? How has what you've been imparting to your students changed over these last 10 years?
Yeah, I guess two things come to mind, because there's been a fairly big shift, not only in how I'm coaching, but also who I'm coaching.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So the who I'm coaching, I guess, is important to point out to explain the method. Before I was publicly advertising coaching, I was only being approached by people who knew me by reputation. So someone who would know an online heads up player by reputation is an online heads up player, basically. Like there's no visibility to that part of the poker community outside of that community itself, pretty much. So I would get, somewhat frequent, but not all that frequent requests specifically from heads up players or from other online players who wanted to play heads up. And that was it. So the method was relatively easy. I mean, I know the game, I know pre-flop, I know flop. I can just kind of walk that person through whatever part of heads up it is that they're struggling with. So it was very strategic in nature. I guess fast forward to, let's say, like start of COVID, when I was not only promoting my coaching more, but also getting a higher volume of requests, presumably because everyone's locked in and finding time to work on their game. The variety of the audience was much broader, right? So now I'm getting requests from online players of every format. And I'm sure part of this is because I'm also playing other games, right? Like I had also started playing live tournaments and I had some success. I had started playing online tournaments and had some success. So I'm getting requests for 3 different game formats. I'm getting requests from live players. I'm getting requests from amateur players. And this, it started to make me recognize, like, okay, I can't just jump in and teach what I know, because everyone's starting from a different place. So my coaching method became a lot more procedural. It became a lot more like, okay, well, first things first, we need to get to know each other. Like, let's do some kind of review, either your database or just like a play and explain, like a conversation, something to help me get in your head and figure out, like, what are we starting with here?
Right.
And in doing so, I can build some sort of plan, right? I can say, okay, well, usually players who are struggling with this concept, need to go to that tool over there, or they need to, I think you get the idea. Like it was less about me presenting like a TED talk, like here's an expert, of Heads Up No Limit, and here's all the top 5 things you need to know about Heads Up No Limit. Like, it wasn't like that anymore. It was a lot more interpersonal. It was a lot more of a learning I guess as a coach, I had to learn more, like, about the person that I was working with.
Must feel pretty good to get such great feedback, and obviously the proof is in the pudding when you keep getting approached by more and more people, and that sort of a thing. And I'll even say as well, there's a quote from on the Run It Once site from Phil Galfond. He was our guest, episode 87. If you guys haven't listened to that one yet, another great episode here on the CardsChat podcast. The quote from him is, "I've watched more videos from Kevin Rabichow than any other coach. His ability to distill complex concepts into easily understood lessons makes him one of the best teachers in the game." So, sort of a two-parter, like from your students seeing that snowball grow, but also from, someone who perhaps is, universally regarded as like, one of the GOATs out there from
Yeah.
Phil Galvin. What does it feel like to get that sort of praise, that sort of following?
Yeah, I mean, really cool. Like, I he said that in a couple different ways now, but I remember the first time that I heard him kind of, just compliment my videos basically, and I mean, it feels good. Obviously, I think prior to that, I made videos with Run It Once, maybe for 4 or 5 years, and like not really thought too much about it.
Mm,
Like I wasn't necessarily going in and thinking about like the quality of my product. I
mm.
was putting out. I was playing full time, so I was recording and putting out content and just kind of whatever it is that I'm working on, here it is, or like whatever's on my mind right now, here it is. And I
Yeah.
wasn't, sitting and reflecting on like the quality of that product or thinking about, okay, what's my, career or future look like as a coach in this game. I was just going through the motions. Um, I think when he said that the first time, I was like, oh shit, like I need, like there's something here, I guess. Like it didn't really hit me that I had been successful at this
Huh.
until someone, who's so obviously successful in that industry just like
Right.
slaps you in the face and says like, hey, your product is great. It's
Wow.
like, oh,
So you
cool.
sort of feel
So
like you have to, I don't know, live up to something more now or improve more? Like,
um I don't know if
hmm,
I haven't given that much thought. My instinct is to say no. My instinct is like that it's just a kind of validating feeling, right?
hmm,
To encourage me to continue doing whatever it is, and like maybe even a little bit of the opposite, maybe even just to like trust whatever I come up with as
yeah.
like a if I come up with a product that's like a little strange, which I think my course is honestly a little strange, like when I come up with a product, I just kind of trust that it's a good idea because someone, in that kind of position trusts that I make good content and I have good instincts for this stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's more encouraging. I think I haven't. I will give that question some thought though. Now that now that you brought it up.
We'll give you the time bank for next time you're on the
Yeah,
show here. We
yeah,
will get into the course a little bit. We got some more like get to know you type questions, coming
sure.
off the felt that are coming up. But I did, like as you're talking about it, as you're into the coaching, I kind of have to add, like, I'm like, I wonder what his answer is going to be because I really don't know at this point. When you're doing one-on-one coaching with someone, at the highest levels, it's known that coaches can charge, I don't know, between let's just give a range, I don't know, between $500 to $1,000. Like that's not unthinkable in terms of rates for, the value of your
Mhm.
time. So let's just take $1,000, nice round number. What feels better to you with everything you've done? Receiving the payment of $1,000 after doing a coaching session or winning $1,000 pot because you outplayed someone or you just did a very good job.
Oh, interesting. What feels better? I mean, in the moment, winning the pot feels better, I
Mhm.
think, for sure. Like it because you get that like the pain. I don't know. I do love coaching. Like don't
Mm.
don't get me wrong, but the competitive part of me, like those individual moments of winning a hand, making a good decision, being rewarded for a good decision, right? Like it's hard to top that.
Mm.
I have to give the edge there to the instant feedback, the in game. I think I would even say that for a smaller amount of money. Like I would say that winning a $500 pot probably feels better than receiving $1,000 coaching payment.
Okay, that's fair. That's interesting. Well,
I don't know if I would like. I'm not saying I would choose it. Like I would,
right, right.
but it feels. I think it feels better.
Okay. Well, as we know this as parents, as teachers, that sort of thing. When you see your kids, your students being successful, when they're
Yeah,
winning titles, not just testimonial on your site, but when you
yeah.
literally see the results of that, and they're saying, "Oh, it's because of what Kevin taught me." How does that make you feel?
Those are great. Like those are hard to describe. Like I've coached a lot of people. I still haven't received, so many of those interactions. Like, so it's still quite novel to me when you get
Mhm.
that, like, here's the graph of my year. Like, I'm thrilled. And it's because you helped me figure out what I was doing here. Like, yeah, holy shit. It's a, that's separate. I would,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really excellent feeling.
Cool. Well, I'm sure that lasts a lot longer than just that adrenaline hit. Also, just winning the pot
It
too.
does, because when you ask me that, I can actually think back to like 5 or 6 specific people who had that interaction with me, and I can't remember the last $500 pot I played. I mean, there's
Very cool.
yeah.
That's great. Wonderful. On your website, just so sort of related to the coaching, but I'm curious here. You write, I'm an avid ultimate Frisbee player and coach. This is a hobby
Right.
that's proven quite valuable to my growth as a coaching professional. I don't necessarily see the connection there. Can you bridge
That's
that
fair.
gap?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so I mean, I I will start by saying I don't know that I'm a particularly good Frisbee coach, but I have done it
Okay.
for a number of years now. I mean, the team that I coached for asked me back twice, so I
Okay.
guess that means something. At least they thought that I was a decent coach.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think the main there's a bunch of little random things that I could pick out about, coaching sports that translates over to poker that was interesting to me, like to make connections between physical sports and mind sports, I guess,
Okay.
if you will. But really what I was thinking about when I wrote that was primarily like the group dynamic of, for example, running a practice in comparison to having like a conversation, because a lot of poker coaching happens in these one-on-one conversations.
Yeah.
And that's just structural. Like that's not really a choice that I made. That's just what coaching was, right? As far as I understood coaching up until I started coaching sports, it was just you get on a call, or or you are texting if it's before the video call era, or whatever it is that you do. You sit down together and you're just one-on-one having a conversation, working on some material together, and that was it. Like that was coaching. What running practices introduced to me was the concept of like designing drills and like speaking to a team, and this more like the sport environment, again, just by nature, like the way that they prepare is different. Nobody sits down one-on-one to talk about if you're a professional basketball player, yeah, you might have some one-on-one conversations with your coach, but like you would never get on a call for an hour to talk about basketball. Like you'd be at the court, you'd have a ball in your hand, you'd be playing in some way, usually anyways. I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but it just kind of reframed the way that I thought about like preparing for poker and for training and for practicing, and it, I think, helped me also work on like the skill set of teaching a group, or the skill set of communicating at different levels at the same time, or pulling people aside from a group setting, those kind of things, stuff you never experience in poker coaching because it's so closed off.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Well, another non-poker field, and you had mentioned it earlier, is you had the other job that you had, the other paying job was as I guess a chef or in the food industry. You wrote on your
I
website
guess
again.
A prep cook or something. Yeah.
Okay. It says, in my free time, I love to cook for my family and friends. I post some of my favorite home cooked meals on Instagram. Amazing pictures, by the way. Very, very cool.
Thank you.
How'd you get into that? What do you love about cooking, and how did that almost steal you away from poker?
Yeah, that is pretty much what happened. I mean, I have to give some credit to my mom for being like a really involved home cook when I was growing up. I don't think that was like front of mind when I decided to pursue cooking myself as like a serious hobby, but certainly like that's been something that her and I have talked about a lot more in recent years. Now that I'm actually cooking, it's like, oh yeah, I've done it that way. Have you tried doing it this way? It's like, oh yeah, have you ever worked with this? So now there's that whole I guess dialogue that we can have, which is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think I'm the natural progression, and maybe like every person in their 20s goes through this, but like when I moved up to Toronto, it was me, 3 of my friends, we're just playing poker all day. We ordered takeout 3 times a day.
Sure.
We just sat in the house at the computer, basically never moving, basically never cooking. At some point we hired in like essentially a prep cook to come just prepare meals for us. That was my life. Like I didn't touch cooking at all.
Wow.
But I was very interested in like restaurants, and no, I just enjoyed eating out. That was something that I guess a lot of my friends in Vegas would have introduced to me the first couple times that I went to Vegas, experiencing fine dining, that kind of thing. So it was slowly but surely, I was like, okay, I'm sick of ordering Thai food for the fifth time this week. Let's at least learn how to do some basic stuff.
Okay.
And I had a roommate who was pretty into cooking as well. His name's Tim, and Tim was, we'd occasionally just buy some nice steaks and vegetables or whatever and make something simple, right? No advanced techniques going on. But he started going to classes at George Brown College, which was just walking distance from our condo. And he loved them. He said, like, it's amazing. I'm learning how to get better with a knife. Like, knife skills are so, this is helping me so much. Like, you need to get better. And he's like trying to coach me a little bit. Like, he's trying to teach me knife skills, and it's just not really happening. He's trying to like teach me techniques that he learned in class, and it's not really happening. And eventually I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go myself. I'll sign up for some night classes. This was maybe 2015 or so. Sign up for some night classes, and they were just, I loved them. They were so much fun. Like, you learn a ton. I like the practical aspect of it. Like, I went to the University of Chicago. We had the joke, like the it's not like a mantra, but you get like t-shirts and stuff that say like, oh yeah, that's how it works in practice, but what about in theory? Like the University of Chicago, like, dynamic is to obsess about theory and to do nothing practical, right? So which is kind of what an economics degree is, after having experienced it. So this was just the complete opposite, right? Like, you're in the kitchen, the classes, you're on your feet for 4 hours, and you're working with pots and pans, you're working with vegetables, you're working with your knife. So it was just fun. I was learning really quickly. I like learning things, I like learning new things as well.
Right.
So I just switched to full time. And of course, when I switched to full time, I had to play a lot less poker.
Yeah, sure.
I think it just overlapped with a time where I was like, I had been pretty successful in poker, but I was also feeling a little burnt out. So I had like the flexibility to take time off. I wasn't sure that I wanted to quit or like, switch to being a coach or switch to being like a more casual player. I had no idea, but I just knew that I was really liking culinary school. So I enrolled in a full-time program, and I did that for 2 years, and I coached on the side, and I played a little bit during that time, but really I was just mostly doing that. It was a ton of fun.
And now it's just more
like,
balanced, basically. Like, you still got that food bug in you.
Yeah. What kind of happened at the end of the program was that you get matched with an industry partner. So you get sent to like, whether it's a restaurant or a hotel or a catering company or whatever. I ended up interviewing with a few, but I went with a catering company, and I worked there for 3 months. And then after 3 months, the chef just like signs off and says like, yeah, they were great. And then you graduate. And I stayed for an extra 3 months beyond that because I was enjoying it. But this was around like early 2019. And at the same time, I started traveling for some live poker tournaments again. And it just, like, the catering got really hard, and like it was quite exhausting. And there was like a couple of events that I was just like, I don't know if this industry is really, like, I like cooking, but I don't know if the industry is for me. And at the same time, I was going to these live poker tournaments, and I was like, this is definitely for me. Like, these games are incredible. The stakes are getting bigger. The prize pools are getting bigger. Like, this is where I want to devote my attention.
Nice.
So I left the culinary industry, if you can say that I was even really part of it, and
for sure.
Came back to poker. So now I like to cook at home. I like to, I watch a lot of food YouTube and stuff. I watch training content, basically. I was going to
ask you if you watch like the Gordon Ramsay and the Master Chef and all that stuff.
I do like that stuff. Yeah. I'm kind of lately into the people who do like independent recipe videos on YouTube. So like a lot of people who used to work for Bon Appetit have like these channels, and there's various test kitchens, and Binging with Babish is always entertaining. Like, there's all these YouTube food kind of media companies that give me good ideas, like recipes to try, and I have the technique, I guess, from school to just try whatever that they put on there. So that's I'm a recreational chef and a serious
poker player.
A serious recreational cook. Yeah.
That's good. Well, I'm happy I ate before this conversation, but to those of you listening before a meal, I hope your next meal's a good one. Before we get into the game plan, your course for Run It Once, just want to ask, you did talk about, now you're playing a lot more live poker. The prize pools are getting bigger and you're getting the lion's share of them. You had your first result in 2019. You had a second place finish at the Party Poker Million in Montreal, just under $500,000. Everything you said until now, it's like, okay, this is for me. You didn't mention the fact that you were winning. Did the fact that you were winning change anything tangibly, or was it really just you love being in that environment? And just, again, sort of the same question as like the online, does the money have any sort of effect or impact, or is it just you feel alive while you're playing?
Yeah, it's still quite important, like just for me to generate income. I mean, I'm not retired by any means.
Right.
So for sure it's important. And I think it was encouraging again that like, I sort of take a leap into live tournaments and I had relatively early success. That said, like, I mean, live tournaments are funny, right? You said my first, I forget if you said first cash or first score, whatever, in 2019. I remember 2019. I remember losing a significant amount of money before making that $500,000 in that tournament, and then continuing to lose a whole lot more after that.
Okay, so that's the context. That's very important. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of the reasons I imagine a lot of pro poker players don't strike up a conversation at the supermarket about what it is that they do, because there's always
fair play.
You won this, but how much did you lose, right? So
sure.
The money matters for sure. It's a necessary motivator for me to keep showing up. And I don't think, nor would I want to have coaching be my only source of income, right? Like, I don't think that that's practical, and that's also just not, it's not the path that I want to take. So it's important to me to keep competing in the tournament space. Players are getting quite good.
Yeah.
And it means that I need to carve out a good bit of time for my own study and preparation too, because I mean, the buy-ins are going up and the guarantees are growing for sure, but also like the competition at the top of tournaments is getting very, very strong. Right.
So I want to talk about two specific competitors. You had one hell of a summer. You won WSOP bracelet online. You defeated Patrick Leonard. And then you also made it to, this is a 2,500 six max event. And then you finished second in the 100K high roller at the WSOP to Michael Adamo, 1.2 million score. Phenomenal. Obviously great, like you said, and I don't know the balances, none of my business, nothing like that. What I want to ask is about those competitors though. You get to heads up. Do you feel, that it doesn't really matter who's sitting across from you, whatever their name is, whatever their Hampton mob and accolades, like, I'm the heads up beast. I've been doing this for years. I can get this guy no matter what,
I mean, sort of, yes. I guess, and just one small correction, the 2,500 World Series event was not a bracelet event, unfortunately. I'm still without a bracelet. That was
my bad. Sorry about
no
that.
worries.
Okay.
But yeah, like it is kind of, it's one of, I guess, like I've had to learn to lean into my strengths a little bit, right, as a player, because I mean, playing live, even for an experienced player, could be quite intimidating, especially if you spend most of your time online. Like it's just a different feeling, and it's hard to bring like all of the, I guess, skill that you're capable of bringing when you're, I don't know, under the hot lights at the World Series, sitting across from someone who has a lot of accolades, right? But really, there's no place that I'm more confident in the tournament. Like the fact that I get to play heads up as part of tournaments is so novel to me, because I've played so much heads up, and I've even studied tournament format quite extensively. Like there's of course differences, but studied tournament format heads up quite extensively over the last couple of years. So like I'm thrilled when I get to heads up. It truly does not matter who I'm playing against.
Nice.
It would change my approach. Like I happen to know that Patrick Leonard is quite good at tournament format heads up. He had me guest appear in his course on Run It Once last year,
right?
Specifically to talk about heads up. And when we went through the heads up material, I was actually quite impressed by like the amount of preparation he had done for heads up, and the approach that he was taking for heads up was quite obviously like well thought out. And I saw that when I played against him. His approach was quite good. Much better, I would say, than the average. I mean, yeah, top tier for a tournament player, basically. In terms of heads up play, which is not true about everyone. I mean, when I played Michael Adamo, we played about 4 hands of heads up. So I didn't get to see that much, but I do think he made a small mistake in one of those 4 hands. So that's promising for me if I'm if I'm playing one of the best in the world and I feel like I spot a mistake in just a couple of hands.
There you go. Okay, well, talking about the best in the world, of course, you can't help but mention the 25K heads up. The bracket tournament at the WSOP. That's, I imagine, I guess the premier of the premier, like the NBA level, whatever you have, you have the best players in the world are entering that. It's not just, usually not just someone just has 25K laying on the side. What's it like going through? I mean, you made it pretty deep as well to the semifinals. What's it like, I don't know, mind sweeping your way through that field?
Yeah, I mean, that experience is one of a kind. I've played quite a lot of heads up tournaments before, and honestly, most of my tournament success before 2019 was just registering like the W Coupe heads up or like the S Coupe heads up or whatever event. And those fields are always it really is tough competition. The format allows like heads up specialists, cash players, any good no limit player to just show up and compete at an extremely high level. And if a tournament player is going to come, it's because they feel really good about their heads up game, right? So the people who show up there really know how to play for the most part. That said, I still like my chances, and it's still really fun. In the one you mentioned, in the 25K heads up this past year, I got to play like first round. I get matched up with Daniel Negreanu, which was quite hilarious because I had been following his heads up game so closely when he challenged Doug Polk, and then when he, his heads up play was actually quite well publicized, and I had seen a lot of it, so that was kind of fun to actually be able to sit down and play against him. And then I got to play Phil Ivey in the bubble round, which was just a whole different kind of experience.
Is there that intimidation factor? Does the mystique of Phil Ivey affect you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't think it would have affected, so I think, a different version of me who didn't get acquainted with Daniel Negreanu through his match against Doug Polk, maybe that version of me is just as intimidated when I sit down against Daniel, there's certain players who have this like long-standing reputation in the poker community, and especially their reputation for table presence, for making big reads, for making really strong decisions. And like, I don't have that yet. Like that's not why I'm good at this game. That's maybe something I could accomplish after 10 or 20 more years in the field, right? But that's not where I'm at right now.
Right.
So with getting matched up against Phil specifically, I don't want to say like blindsided me, but it's just not what you prepare for when you're thinking, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to get ready for in this heads up tournament? I'm going to be playing a whole bunch of crushers. That's a given. But like to sit down against someone who's not only an excellent heads up player, but also like one of the greatest of all time live poker players, if not the greatest, it feels different. And I'd never played with him before. So it just kind of catches you off guard. It's hard to get comfortable. It's very hard for me to get comfortable.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Not many people get to, that's again, like, you talk about he's won his 10 bracelets, and other titles. So there's people who've played him heads up like that, but not many folks get to say they've played heads up, outside of the 6 max or the 9 max or whatever it is. So it's a very cool perspective to hear that from you. We don't have an episode with Phil Ivey yet. Maybe we'll do that'll be I don't know, something really, really special if we ever get that. But we did do an episode with Daniel Negreanu. It was the one right before you, episode number 100. So you can feel free to listen to that as well. Maybe get some additional insight so you can mow him down next time. Next time in the heads up tournament. Nice. Who would you consider to be the toughest heads up opponent you've ever played and won?
That's a tough question to answer. I mean, there's been players who I found quite challenging to play against, who I just didn't play for very long. Like I've played a small amount against Doug Polk. I've played a small amount against Linus Love. I've played a small amount against like OTB Red Baron. Like these are all players who I think, at least in the online world, are were at some point like top tier.
Yeah.
But I'm not really someone who's like swung for the fences in terms of playing against the best of the best for an extended period of time. So I don't think it would be fair to say like, oh, they're the people who, you know, who I couldn't handle playing against or whatever.
Right.
I just like never really gave that a fair shot. I assumed that they were some amount better than me. I don't know how much, maybe a small amount, maybe a larger amount, but more often my heads up games were against like the perceived second tier competition, you might say, like still playing for high stakes, right? If I'm playing online, talking about playing 10-20 or 25-50, sometimes 50-100. And I think the player that, I mean, this is probably going to be nobody to 99% of people listening, but there was a player who I don't even know his real name, whose screen name was Mummy Pois, MUUMIPOISS, Mummy, whatever. And we played a lot. So like my exposure to playing against this person was extended, right? I got to know them quite well in terms of their style.
A lot of notes.
Yeah, and just like I was consistently impressed by how often like I would make the wrong assumption about what they were doing, or that I would, I think there were some things that they did quite well against me that just went unnoticed for a long period of time. And this is for reference, this is probably like 2014 to 2016 or so that we played the majority of our hands against each other. But this was just an opponent who, like, again, they were probably never like top of the top tier. They were quite successful. I think they went on to play big live games in Macau, but they were just someone who like consistently threw different stuff at me. And I like to stick to kind of like a more simple strategy. I like to stick to something that I know quite well. And he was just quite good at like breaking me out of that, quite good at exploitative play, basically.
Interesting.
But had that right style to just every so often convince me that he was terrible. Like had that right balance of skill and insanity that you would see something and you'd be like, that can't be good. And then, and then 2 weeks later you're down another 20,000. And it's okay, well, maybe it could be good. I don't know exactly what's happening here. So that like he sticks out in my mind. I think there were a couple other players who sort of fall in a similar category, right? But there just weren't that many players who I played like over an extended period of time who just consistently got the best of me. There was usually either more back and forth over time, or it was just very clear from the beginning, like, I'm not interested in putting up a fight against this player.
Gotcha.
Like, they can, they can have their rung above me on the hierarchy. That's
sure.
fine.
I mean, game selection is poker 101. There's no you don't win any medals just for beating someone who's perceived to be better. Might as well make your money against those who you can hold over. Hopefully a slightly easier question, or one that'll make you think as well, one that we always ask all of our interviewees. Who is the friendliest player that you've ever competed against, whether it's heads up or in a full ring game?
The friendliest player. I mean, I'll just go with who came to mind right off the bat, which was my second opponent in that 25K heads up at the World Series, Masato. I'm forgetting his last name off the top of my head, but he's a Japanese YouTuber, like vlogger, streamer, whatever. Like, he makes all the content. He was super fun to play against, extremely friendly. Even when losing, like, I mean, I did beat him, obviously. just like super happy, and I mean, I can understand why he's so good at creating content as a player as well, because he just seems like genuinely super excited about poker, and that comes through at the table, and that's hard to fake, I think. And after the fact, I'm even thinking, like, I ran into him at a later tournament, like a couple weeks later in the series, and he like orders bubble tea for me and like a couple of his friends.
Nice.
Like I beat him in the 25K, and he's coming over, and he's saying hi, and he's bringing bubble tea to the table.
That's super cool. Masato Yokosawa is his last name.
Yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Really, really great player, and really like just full of good energy. I like knowing that people like him are like promoting the game to to some audience that, I don't know, maybe a few of them follow me now, because I think I had a couple of people come up to me who, like, I could tell we're struggling through the English, but really just wanted to say, like, I saw you on Masato's channel.
Oh,
Like,
that's
you played against each other, and that's super cool.
That is, he's certainly
Yeah,
got quite the
he's great.
following. I think he
Yeah.
maybe also won Vlogger of the Year. I'm not 100% sure, but
Oh,
I
is
think
that right?
I think at the GPI, the last installment. So
Very cool.
you're definitely a channel worth checking. I've watched a couple of them. You can't say I'm subscribed or anything, but that everything you said definitely comes through as far as a love for the game. That's pretty cool. Great answer. All right. Before we get into the community questions, I promise we talk about the game plan. Let's go ahead and give us your, I guess, 30 to 60 second, depends on how tall the building is, elevator pitch. Who is this course for over at Run It Once? And besides the fact that it's on a 25% discount for a limited time, why should they get it?
Yeah, so the course is designed really for people who either like have or have thought about reaching out for coaching, not necessarily from me, but I modeled it pretty much for my typical like potential student. So a lot of people coming with questions that are like, I don't know how to use these tools. I'm overwhelmed with study options. I'm not sure where to go in improving my game. Just people who are feeling kind of lost or stagnant or what have you, right? In working on poker. And I guess this is specifically about No Limit.
Yeah.
And it's not just for heads up players, but it is better for heads up players because I include a lot of specific strategy points about my heads up game in the making of the course. But really, it's just meant to lay out and package like an A to B process to figure out what you're starting with, what you're trying to improve at, how to improve, how to use tools better, how to tackle the daunting task of studying poker, basically, and then kind of how to evaluate progress, right? Like how to feel confident about what your strategy is, what your game plan is at the tables. So yeah, what you get with the course is first of all, like a whole bunch of templates to go through the process that I just described, and accompanying videos, of course, to walk you through the process. But also, if you purchase it before the sale ends on October 10th, you get access to 4 live seminars that I'll be starting the week after the sale finishes. And those are happening in the Discord community, which is also, you'll be added to a Discord community exclusively for course members. I'm in there managing the whole thing. So that's really like the place to make sure that whatever process it is that you're trying to go through, the process that you kind of laid out through the course is actually happening, right? I think that study group component is really, really important, and it would have felt wrong to leave that out because I know how helpful that's been for me in getting better at the game.
Sure. Oh, like that's actually the follow-up that I wanted to ask. Like part of so much of it is developing the good study habits. Without giving away too much, obviously. Tell us a little bit about your own study habits.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if I was worried about giving away too much, I probably wouldn't have made so many training videos. The study process for me is kind of like, I guess, call it cyclical. So when I go to events, when I play a series, I'm taking notes on the spots that just kind of didn't sit right. Like not necessarily hands where I'm like, oh, I got to run that in a solver. I'm curious if it's like this hand or that hand. Like I'll do stuff like that too, but that's not really what I'm referring to. I'm thinking more like a scenario that I found myself in where I was just like, I couldn't even come up with the structure. I couldn't even come up with like how I'm supposed to approach that situation. So I try to keep a running list of all these things, and then I move them, when I get home or whatever, I move them to a place on my computer that's just like a to-do list. And maybe every 2 to 3 months, I'll shift the top few items of that to-do list over to like an active study plan, right? Like I move it from like the backlog to the, during this 2 to 3 month period, this is what I'm going to solve. Like, this is these are the scenarios I'm going to figure out how it is that I want to approach in general. So it's a lot more like zoomed out, I guess, than typical poker study is for a lot of people. And I do still use solvers to like run individual hands or whatnot, but that's just like, to me, that's a very small part of the process. It's more about like building big heuristics, like building a kind of an overarching strategy that helps me understand, like, okay, yeah, whenever I'm in, whenever I'm in this like out of position squeeze situation, the way that I want to think about it is this. And like, I want to know that when I sit down at the table next time, I'm going to be in that spot and I'm going to be able to like repeat that structure in my head and actually make sense of it.
Sure. Well, the last question I've got before we move into the community questions, folks have been, hearing all about all of the coaching you've done over 10 years, clearly someone who has proven his mettle at the felt, both online and live, and as a coach who continues to improve, continues to get tremendous praise, renown. I don't think I'd be mistaken by saying that the game plan is probably your most ambitious, comprehensive, complex project to date. How long did it take you to put all of this together from, hey, let's make a course, to the course is ready?
So I guess I would say around the start of this year was when like the concept of making a course started to come together, but it wasn't yet, defined as like, oh, it's going to be like a coaching methods course. That wasn't really, I think around January, I was probably thinking like, oh, maybe I should make a heads up course. I was actually talking with, collaborating. I don't want to say with who because it fell through, but I was in talks with all sorts of ideas. I had lots of course ideas. I was really big on like, I want to do training products. I want to do group coaching. I want to do seminars. Like I wanted to do everything. So the specific idea for the course, I think, came after a few conversations with the Run It Once team, around March. And I probably spent like a solid month from there until when did I go? There was a series in Florida that I went to like early April, maybe. So like for a solid month in March, I was working on a lot of the background content. And then when I got back from there, I was like so ambitious. I was like, I'm gonna get home mid-April. I'm gonna do all the videos before the World Series of Poker. just gonna bang out like 60 videos, no problem. We'll have it all done by June 1st. We'll launch before the World Series of Poker. It's like, so obviously, we're here now talking about the launch. It just launched 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So that didn't happen exactly, but there's a solid 5 or 6 weeks there between the Florida series and the World Series, and that was all video production. That was all finishing touches on like I ran a lot of sims for this course. Like that takes more time than I realized it would. I built a lot of templates like Excel sheets and stuff. Formatting that takes longer than I thought it would. There was still another 2 or 3 weeks after I got home from the World Series until I was like, okay, now it's actually done. Like now we can start talking about it.
For sure. I'm sure it feels good just to have the course out there. See, your name in print, so to speak. See it all out there. Good stuff. All right, well, guys, it's now time we turn to the next segment of the show. We turn to you, our Cards Chat community, to see what questions you wanted to ask our guests. We have a dedicated thread on the Cards Chat forums for this. So as we announce who our future guests will be, please be sure to send in your questions. Our first question comes to us from Chica Bonita, the recent winner, I believe, of the $100 in the Daniel Negreanu episode for asking the question that he thought was the best. So there's Chica Bonita for you. Wants to know, Kevin, you like to cook. How do you feel about the national dishes of different countries? And do you have a favorite dish among them, perhaps?
This feels like a quiz about what the national dishes of every country is.
I just read what they tell me. That's what the questions are.
Yeah, of course. I think that, so in culinary school, we pretty much just cook French food. So a lot of the dishes that come to mind when I'm cooking, I feel like it's just either like Americanized French food or Canadianized, I guess, if that's the way it goes.
Okay.
Like what? Perhaps the Canadian national dish is poutine. I'm not really sure. It's very good. I would only get it in Quebec. I wouldn't get it elsewhere. But yeah, I can say more generally what I find myself like craving and wanting to make most often. I make a lot of like Thai dishes or like Vietnamese kind of style dishes. Just, I don't know, the like fresh flavor and the sometimes like cold dishes as well, like the temperature the interesting temperatures, I guess, you get in those kind of foods. Like that's some of the stuff that I like making the most, or that I like eating the most.
Do you have like a favorite ingredient to use?
Ooh,
That's
I
my
have
question.
this like, I mean, it's becoming pretty common to have, like, I'm just thinking of a condiment that I put on everything. I have this like, it's kind of like chili crisp. A lot of people talk about chili crisp, I guess, like chili oil with fried garlic and that sort of thing. But this one also has miso paste in it
Mm,
and like sesame seeds. So it's this kind of, um, it's like a very savory chili crisp,
hmm.
basically. I forget the brand name offhand, but it's very good. If you ever see like a chili miso,
Interesting.
sesame oil based condiment
Okay.
sitting around,
Noted.
excellent on everything.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's why I'm no big cook by any means, but like I'm Laurie's garlic salt. Same thing. It's good on
Yeah.
everything. It's just
Yeah.
very simple,
That
but like
was
nothing exotic
that
there.
would have been my mom's answer, I think. Like
Uh-huh.
there's a big jar of that in the spice cupboard. I mean, at
Nice.
least when I was a kid, I remember yeah, being a big fan of that stuff.
Cool. All right. Next one from Chica Bonita. Are there any coaches or trainers, instructors in the poker industry whose careers or teaching methodologies you admire? Do you have a favorite among them?
So, I mean, yeah, for sure. In the back of my mind, I'm like, do I have to say that Phil Galfond is my favorite instructor after he says that I make his favorite videos? I mean, he's great, obviously, right?
Sure.
And actually, speaking on methodology, like something that I appreciate about the YouTube content he's been doing lately is that he gets into a lot of like it's this like condensed explanation of methods
Mm,
around, how he thinks about a certain situation, how he thinks about approaching study, about exploiting, about live reads, whatever, like mental. What did I see recently? He talked about pitfalls is not the word, but like I think it was delusions. I think it was like
mm,
delusions of poker players and stuff. So mental game stuff, right? Like he's hitting really practical um concerns rather than just regurgitating strategy, which I
mhm.
think is what I look for, and what I try to do myself is I of course talk strategy, but try to talk about practical implementation as much as possible. So I saw that also, I guess, a previous podcast I was on, Chasing Poker Greatness with Brad
Brad Wilson, good guy.
Wilson.
Yep.
He takes the same sort of very practical approach that stood out to me the first time I talked to him. I know that my friend Faraz does the same thing with his coaching site. He's really good, I think, about just cutting to the core of like, here's what you need in live poker tournaments. Like, and yes, we're going to talk about solvers and advanced strategy, but like not in a way that's so convoluted that the lay person can't understand it. So
Right.
I'm sure there's many more, but that's just like the gist of what I'm looking for in a quality coach.
Cool. And you did mention Faraz. I assume you meant Faraz Jaka. I don't know
Yeah.
any of the Faraz's,
Yes.
but that he was episode number 48. If you guys want to experience a little
Nice.
bit more of the Faraz Jaka world. Asset Burn FX is our next and final question asker. Guys, don't forget to send in your questions for our podcast guests. Asset Burn FX always asks some creative ones. Kevin, he wants to know. What is the nicest act you secretly did for someone?
The nicest act I secretly did for someone. I mean, I know that hmm, trying to think of something more unique than just like making a donation that I didn't tell anybody about, because I've done that.
Okay, that's fair.
But
If you
yeah,
can't, I have a follow-up. So,
nothing's like jumping to mind. I
okay.
think, yeah, I mean, like beyond just a donation, I'm also thinking about like a time in university when I, like met a homeless guy who
Mm,
frequented outside of the dorms and like had to go up to my room to go get him some money and some food. Like that's something that I don't remember telling anyone about, but also like not the nicest thing ever. Like I think that was what a lot of people would have done had they met
mm,
the guy under the circumstances that I
yeah.
did. But yeah, I'm curious your follow up.
Well, my follow-up is what's your favorite cause to donate to?
Mm, yeah. So I guess on the topic of like food, like the food industry, I got to reading a lot of material about food insecurity and other than, I mean, in addition to, I should say, just like food banks in general, I think I've probably donated the most of the places that I have to the Good Food Institute, and other more local organizations that work on the same things. Basically, whether they're if anyone's in Toronto, the Stop Food Market is the other one, or the Stop Community Market, I think they're called, is the other one that I've donated frequently to.
Nice.
But yeah, basically just organizations that help battle like local food insecurity. And they also, I think the Good Food Institute in particular, invest money into like more advanced things because they're a lot larger. So they, invest money into research to avoid future problems of this kind on a global scale.
Good stuff. Like I don't ask that question of many, but like when it comes up, I do, because I think there's certain questions you can learn a lot about a person. Like what are their core values, and like, oh, well, where is it that you put your money? That you donate to. So that's a good answer. I like it very, very much. Acid Burn FX also wants to know, Kevin, who is the most interesting person you've ever met and why?
The most interesting person. I mean, there's a lot of interesting people in poker. I don't know if I want to call one of them out.
Interesting is not a negative thing.
Yeah, that's true. I don't want to, I don't want to forget about someone particularly interesting.
Oh, they're not listening though.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. They're probably not. Yeah, most interesting. I mean, if I'm thinking about if I'm thinking about poker, actually, let's can we cut some dead space? I'm actually going to give this some thought.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess I don't know about most interesting, but someone who comes to mind from like the time that I was in culinary school, was one of my teachers who was just like obsessed with McDonald's, and not obsessed with McDonald's in the way that I mean, like, just really wanted to enjoy a Big Mac or whatever, or like wanted to talk about how it wasn't sort of talking about how they were like the pinnacle of culinary food, but it was this very stark contrast of like everything we did in culinary school was about high cuisine, amazing techniques, like the best ingredients, the best food. And then we would go to his class. I think it was like the math class basically. And he was all about, it was like, you need to look closer at what McDonald's is doing if you want to understand like business, right? Like his just kind of insisting on presenting this like counterculture perspective, I guess. And the culture was all like praise high food, like praise expensive ingredients. And he was like, no, praise efficiency, like praise quick service models, like praise assembly lines. And I was like, I mean, I get it, but you don't hear that, I guess, about the food industry. And because I was thinking through like all the people who have taught me something about food, and I was even thinking about the chef at the catering company, who I think was just like a really positive impact, and he was like a great teacher and a great chef. But more interesting, like through that whole period of my life, the most interesting person I think was the guy who like once a week we would go and talk about stats, but then he would just like derail the class to talk about McDonald's and efficiency and
that is amazing.
And how important basically the fast food industry is to food, like
that is interesting.
And like mall food courts and stuff, like all that whole part of the industry. He was just like really, it was a good perspective to have, I think.
I wonder if he ever dropped this nugget, or if you knew it already, that the McDonald's, I believe, again, I think this is still true, makes most of their money not on food but on real estate, because they own all the franchises. Do you ever talk to you guys about that?
He did not specifically talk about that. I think his angle here was just about like, if he's like trying to teach future restaurant owners or like future industry professionals, it's like, don't ignore the knowledge that you can get from this segment,
right?
But I mean, that is also part of the knowledge, I guess, that you can get, is that It's more profitable to own
There you
the
go.
real estate than it is to, pay rising rent
For
costs
sure.
as part of your overhead.
For sure.
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense.
We'll do two more and then we'll wrap it up. Acid Bird FX wants to know, Kevin, what unnecessary products or services do you consider necessary and why?
Oh, which unnecessary ones do I consider
Great
necessary?
questions, Acid Bird FX.
Yeah, I like that one. I mean, I've got so many monthly subscriptions on the go, and I've gone through 3 or 4 like iterations of trying to remove them all, and then
Wow.
eventually and then just, still being stuck with a couple, and then trying to remove them all and still being stuck with a couple. Some
That's
of them
better than
not by
most.
choice.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them, like canceling your $2 New York Times subscription is surprisingly difficult.
Because it's just
But
$2. Right.
no, like literally they make it hard. And they're very devious. But yeah, I think like of those, and it probably is completely unnecessary. I've never been able to bring myself to cancel like the subscription to this recipe service that I have,
Hmm.
which like hasn't provided me with new information in quite a long time, I'm sure. But it's just like to have a trusted resource to go to for that thing that I do every day, right? Like I cook every day. This isn't like, doesn't have to be about cooking, right? But
Mhm.
to know that I've got like uh, a standard like a catalog of all the answers that I need to all the questions that I'm going to have.
Mhm.
I think it's, it's worthwhile to pay for that kind of thing. So maybe that would be like the equivalent of, if Wikipedia charged money instead
Right.
of just asking for donations.
Right.
Like I would definitely be someone with a Wikipedia subscription, even though, I look something up like once every 6 months.
Sure. Okay. Fair. Very
Yeah.
cool. We're going to end off with this one. I love this question a lot. So, I mentioned to you, I get some help from my good friends, Heather and Mike help me a little bit with the prep, all the time, basically. And of course, we've got plenty of, my own questions as follow-ups. We got plenty of questions from our wonderful community members. Asset Burn FX wants to know this one. I like this. What questions would you ask or would you have asked if you were the interviewer today instead of the interviewee? So in other words, is there something we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about?
So this is something I'm asking myself.
Hmm.
Is as the okay, I get it. Um, huh. Well, I probably I like your approach on kind of steering away from, the specifics of whatever, poker strategy and thinking about more of like poker community and poker culture and that kind of thing. I think I would have done the same. I think something about poker culture,
Hmm.
like, like not weighing in on like current events, but weighing in on like something about poker culture, I think would have been on my mind.
Okay.
I'm someone who occasionally gets into arguments on Twitter about, women in poker and about and about language, use of
Mhm.
language or whatever it is. Like those are nice topics, I think, to broach every now and then. They're not the most fun to talk about
Okay.
necessarily, but yeah, I think maybe, sneaking into a perhaps heavy hitting poker culture question. I don't know which one specifically, but that would have been part, like a small percentage of my approach as the interviewer.
Interesting. Okay. Well, duly noted, perhaps for part two someday in the future, or
Sure,
someone among our future interviewees. Guys, I want to thank you
sure.
all for sending questions in to Kevin Rabichow. And again, a friendly reminder to all of you out there in the Cards Chat community. We would love to see you submit your questions, whether they are just, more lighthearted or a little deeper as well, for our future podcast guests in the dedicated thread on the forums. Please be sure to give us a good review on iTunes and spread the word via your social media channels if you'd like the show. Before we let you go, Kevin, anything else you'd like to share with the Cards Chat community?
No, just I guess thanks for listening. Thanks for your questions. And you can find me at all the usual places with my full name, as Robbie has already mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your time, Kevin. I appreciate it, and it's been a real blast getting to know you. This is pretty cool. Folks, I'm Robbie Straczynski. You can follow me on Twitter at CardPlayerLife. I wish you all a wonderful day.